From Penn State University, this is Pennsylvania Inside Out, connecting communities to a world of creativity and knowledge. Here's tonight's host, Patty Satalia.
Good evening. Coming up on Pennsylvania Inside Out, are we ready for our first Madam President? When the first woman president moves into the White House, whenever that might be, she will be indebted to at least 5 women who ran for president before her and so helped pave the way. We'll talk about women in politics with a focus on the media, voters, and public opinion. Our guest is Dr. Nichola Gutgold. She's an associate professor of communication arts and sciences at Penn State Lehigh Valley and author of Paving the Way for Madam President. The book chronicles the lives, communication styles, and presidential bids of 5 remarkable women: Margaret Chase Smith, Shirley Chisholm, Patricia Schroeder, Elizabeth Dole, and Carol Moseley Braun. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
From Ireland to the Philippines and even to some Muslim countries, there are women presidents and prime ministers all over the globe. Why not yet in the United States?
Well, because a woman has not run in the United States who can be elected, and when she does, she'll win.
So what was it about the 5 women to date who have run for president that stalled their campaigns and kept them from making a difference? Well, they did make a difference.
Oh, they absolutely made a difference. But as with any political candidate, there are many reasons why a person isn't successful. And so if we look at the 5 that are spotlighted in this book, we can look at several different reasons. For example, the first woman that we look at in the book is Margaret Chase Smith. And the year was 1964, and she refused to take any campaign contributions. In fact, if someone sent her a check even for $100, she promptly returned it with a personal note saying that she couldn't possibly accept it. That's a great hindrance to any candidate, male or female. That was one of her obstacles. We look at Shirley Chisholm, who didn't have a lot of money raised and said it herself, although I'm not sure that was her major obstacles. Paraphrasing her, she said, "I'm a woman and I'm black, so I have 2 strikes against me." Her campaign didn't have a lot of power behind it, as we know we need in order to win the nomination. And then Pat Schroeder, who came in as sort of a substitute candidate for Gary Hart when he dropped out of the race in 1988. And she said she just couldn't do it because she saw the writing on the wall. She got in late, didn't have a lot of money, although she didn't cite money as the reason, and she dropped out of the race. Forward to Elizabeth Dole's bid, again, a money issue. She ran during a time when a candidate had, in fact, 2 of the candidates, we look at Forbes and George W. Bush back in 2000, literally unprecedented amounts of money. And although a seasoned politician herself, had been through several presidential races with her husband, she realized that she won't win the nomination, and she backed out. And then 2004, Carol Moseley Braun, just a race that never got off the ground. Didn't have much support. Some of her campaign stops included 1 or 2 people in the audience. Here's a woman who said, I would love to fight the good fight, but it's obvious here it's not going to happen, and she backed Kerry.
And so today we have Hillary Clinton, who does have the support and the financial backing.
That's right, and I think that that's what is most different about the current woman who is running for president versus the 5 that are in this book. Hillary Clinton's bid for the presidency is not a symbolic one by any means. Most polls show her as the front runner in the Democratic Party. She has a lot of money. She is very famous. She has a very strong campaign team. She's very savvy with the media. We noticed that when she made her presidential bid announcement, it was on the internet, January 20th, and she wasn't reticent. She didn't sound like a candidate that has any liability. She said, "I'm in, and I'm in to win." That's a very forceful statement, and so she has things going for her in terms of not having liabilities.
Does it help that she's running in a campaign that is so diverse? We're talking about a woman running for president, an African-American running for president, a Mormon running for president, Annie, who's been married 3 times, an older candidate, McCain at 72, and so maybe being female is not the liability that it once was.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Patty. And I think that whenever we have something that's an other, something that's a little different than the typical, we are spotlighted. But here we are, and in my opinion, this group of candidates represents what America looks like. It looks very diverse. And so, in my view, this is a very positive step toward accepting diverse cultures and diverse gender, of course, and looking at people that can lead who are not all white, males, middle-aged. And so this is a step forward.
You say that all of these people will have helped to pave the way for whoever wins, whether it's Hillary Clinton to be the first woman in office or some other woman down the road. But they're women that, to a certain extent, we've kind of forgotten about. In fact, other people who've written about those who have made a bid for president never even mentioned these women in their books.
And that's true. And in fact, over 20 women have run for president, but scarcely a mention of them can be found. In fact, I thought very telling was in 1972, we had not only Shirley Chisholm running for president, we had a congresswoman from Hawaii named Patsy Mink. And she died in the very late 90s, I think 99. And when I went through her New York Times obituary, it did not include her bid for the presidency. And so I tracked down her daughter, who is a professor, I think in Seattle, and I had asked her about this. We conversed over email, and her daughter agreed that certainly it just was the way it was. People didn't really acknowledge that she was doing it. And I think that this is something that shouldn't be, and that's why we have to make note that these are people who have run for president, who happen to be female, and they certainly believed at the time that their campaigns had some stamina to them.
You're watching Pennsylvania Inside Out on WPSU. Our guest is Dr. Nichola Gutgold. She's an associate professor of communication arts and sciences at Penn State Lehigh Valley and an expert on female political rhetoric. Her most recent book is Paving the Way for Madam President. The book is published by Lexington Books. You write about Geraldine Ferrara in your book, who you were fortunate to have write the foreword. We're talking about someone who actually did get her party's nominee for vice president a little more than 20 years ago. She was someone who was scrutinized in a way that perhaps other candidates were not. Her family was scrutinized. There were rumors about her husband, who was Italian, his links to the mafia. People asked her if she was any good at baking blueberry muffins, something that you'd never ask a male candidate. Has that changed? Have the kinds of questions that female candidates get asked changed?
I think the changes I've been noticing are most recent. I mean, with this election. I think that the tide is turning. I think that women are not being treated as different in terms of their family life and their appearance as much as men, but there still is a gap. There's just no denying it. I think when we look at women who are in media, whether they're politicians or not, we see a tremendous difference in the way women look versus men. For example, we have 60 Minutes, and we have a woman, Leslie Stahl, who is on 60 Minutes, who is 61, I believe she is. Well, her colleagues are 70 and 80 years old. So that's part of the gap we see, and she's fabulous looking for 60.
Fabulous for even
50,
younger than 60. Right.
And so I think the point I'm trying to make is that females are not being asked as many questions because it's embarrassing, I think, on the part of the journalist who might ask a question like that. However, they're simply being held to a higher standard. We don't see a gray-haired woman running for president. Maybe we will. But we see a fairly good-looking 60-year-old woman who has obviously a lot of stamina, and I think that's the unspoken requirement, that these women are still very youthful.
But according to an Associated Press survey, women hold other women to a higher standard than they might otherwise hold a male candidate.
I think that's true, and some of the research I read especially points to professional women are especially hard on Hillary Clinton, that her numbers are lowest among women who are similarly educated as she is. And so I'm not sure what to make of that, except that you know, I guess time will tell if she's able to win over that demographic and be ultimately successful.
You know, Barack Obama is running for president. He's not the first African American to make a bid for the presidency. In fact, Al Sharpton, a Democrat, ran in 2004, and he said something that I thought was interesting. We may be ready to elect an African American or a woman, but not just any African American or woman.
I think that's a very smart statement that he made. I think that we want to elect a person who we think will do a good job for America, and gender and race are secondary. And so you'll always have sort of groupies who get very excited about the idea of a woman president, but thinking people who are casting their vote will not be satisfied with simply a woman or simply an African American.
You talked about this country as being a very masculine country, and the image of the presidency is only real men run for president, and ego is certainly a huge part of that. In what way, in terms of personality, background, and drive, is a female contender different from a male contender?
Well, I think actually there are less differences than many people would like to believe. I think that all men and all women have both masculine and feminine traits. And what I see as a difference is how those traits are perceived by the public. Both men and women cry. However, if a woman presidential candidate cries on camera and it's widely noted in the press,
as it was for Pat Schroeder.
As it was for Pat Schroeder, she may get an image as being too soft to push a button for war. If a male candidate who cries in public is seen that way, maybe he's crying at a funeral, for example. I remember Bill Clinton crying at the funeral for Ron Brown. The press covers those things very favorably. And so I think that there are just double standards in what we'll accept from the male and female portrayal in the public eye, but we both have those qualities.
You mentioned pressing the button for war. I'm wondering if it's more difficult for a woman to make a bid for president in a time of war.
I think it is. I think because that's the ultimate question. But I think it's getting easier because we have had Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. We have Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. And I think these women inch forward the idea that here are powerful women, worldly women, women who could communicate effectively all over the world with leaders of every magnitude. What's the difference? And we come to the sane conclusion that there is none, that women are leaders. Some women are leaders, some men are leaders, and it's only a matter of time until we elect a woman who is a leader for America.
And that very question about pushing the button was actually posed to Geraldine Ferrara when she was running as vice president about 20 or so years ago. Someone said, asked whether she was man enough to press the nuclear button, which is sort of irrelevant right now, but are you man enough?
Right, which is very insulting because masculine enough might be a better way to put it, because I know plenty of men who wouldn't be man enough themselves, so to speak, to push the button. And so I think that this is getting better, but it's still a perception that we have, because as much as we have become a country where men and women are equals, there's still the old ideology that a man will go out and earn a living and a woman will tend to the home, and that's changing, and I think it's changing for the better.
What impact, if any, because we're talking about these 5 women paving the way for whoever becomes the first female president, but what impact, if any, do television programs like Commander-in-Chief, where Gina Davis played the President of the United States, here's a young, attractive woman, she has a very supportive husband at home, has it sort of softened us to the idea that, yes, a woman could be president?
I think so. And the White House Project, an organization that is in place in order to promote women's leadership and ultimately a president who is a woman, says so. According to their research, they say that whenever the media portrays women in very strong roles, it's positive. It shows that that we are becoming more receptive. It's not unusual. It's believable. So it helps inch forward the psyche that, yes, here's a woman president. And remember Glenn Close in Air Force One as the vice president, a very strong female character. And I think that, although you might say it's Hollywood, well, if we can see it, some of us will believe it more.
And if we're not uncomfortable watching it.
Right.
You mentioned inching forward, and the White House project that you just alluded to endorsed the creation of a Barbie president. One, I think the first one back in 2000, and then a reissue. What's the idea behind that? Is it to make girls more comfortable with the idea that you can grow up and become president?
Right. And I interviewed Marie Wilson from the White House Project, and she said she flinched. You know, she said, I just can't endorse a Barbie doll at first. But she realized that this is what little girls play with. And if they're going to play with dolls anyway, why not play with a President Barbie doll? Because it will promote the idea, again, that a woman could be president. In my research, I came through across a lot of children's literature that has a girl portraying a president. Sesame Street did one with a character named Betty Lou, where Betty Lou was running for president. And I think that that can only be a good thing, that if a little girl is reading, let her read about a young woman aiming to be president versus aiming only to be first lady, because it will put it in her head that that's a good job.
Right now, currently, we're at an all-time high in terms of the number of women in the U.S. Senate. It's 16 out of 100. 11 of them are Democrats, 5 of them are Republicans. How important is that? And it's still so far off from the 50-50, which is the breakdown between men and women in the population.
Right. It's great that we have 16, and I think the numbers will increase. As I mentioned about becoming president, so many factors go into whether or not a person is elected. Same is true. So a lot of these organizations like the White House Project and Emily's List, some of the things they do is promote that women run. Because if more women are in the pipeline, then the chances of them becoming elected will be greater. So it's not just a matter of can we get these women to win, it's let's get the numbers out there to run so we have enough female candidates who are viable. We look at the presidential race and we have one woman. See what I'm pointing to is, well, why don't we have 3 women and 3 men running for president?
When we do finally, and I think the question now is when, not if, we get a woman president someday, do you think that will ultimately change the presidency, the office itself, having a female in there?
Actually, I don't think so. I think that it's a job, and it has certain requirements to fulfill it successfully. I don't think it's actually going to change what that job looks like. I think male or female will be done. And I think it's very positive. I think as I'm raising my daughter who's 12, it would be a delight to have her in her youth see the election of a woman president for no other reason, to see that it's a job a woman could have. It surprised me so much when I started my research on this book that grown women and men, some couldn't even realize that a woman could be president. Because they never saw it, they just thought, oh, could a woman be elected? I had several legal thinking people, exactly, constitutional, you know, and so, boy, you know, that shouldn't be.
Well, Pat Schroeder said 2 of the gender-specific obstacles that she faced were, 1, sexist men who couldn't imagine a president carrying a purse,
right,
and 2, very ultra-conservative women who just couldn't conceive of a woman with that much power.
Right, and there will always be this group, you know, here or there, who sees it as a difficulty. So I appreciate that that is part of the problem of electing a woman president. Recently, I saw Bill Clinton on Larry King, and I think it's very interesting how he handles himself, because here he is, arguably the greatest politician of modern times, charismatic, warm, and not to overshadow his wife on the campaign trail is a delicate balance for him to maintain. And Larry King asked him, well, what will you do if your wife's elected president? What are you going to do? And he said, whatever she tells me to do. You know, good answer, I thought, because we don't know what he'll do, and we might not want too much information about that, because if he says too much, it might damage what people will think the power is for Hillary Clinton. So.
Well, another question here is, will Hillary get invited to be on the Larry King show? You see male presidential candidates who may be perceived as looser and more fun than females, and maybe make better television. Do the female get the same kind of press time in that way?
Yes. Hillary Clinton has been on some of the late-night comedian shows, and these are very scripted moments, at least to my eye they appear to be, but she's very good. And so are the men who are on. It's become a very televised event, electing the President of the United States, as you know. And so an appearance on a major network comedy show isn't going to go unrehearsed by these folks. And they make sure that when they appear, they measure their words very carefully. Every joke is timed and ahead of time is approved.
You write in the final chapter of your book, which is titled Continuing on the Trail, you quote an overworked female executive who is trying to balance work and home, and she says, "The females who come after us scarcely give us a second thought, but they will walk on our bones." And my guess is the 5 women you wrote about in your book, in a way, are scarcely remembered as well, but they've made a difference. Which one most impressed you, or is whose story is the most compelling to you?
Well, I guess if you would say, well, of the women who are no longer with us, who would I like to meet? I would say Shirley Chisholm. She was very inspirational to me for many reasons. She had a lot of self-respect and drive and worked tirelessly on education, and so I would say Chisholm was one very interesting woman that would be a wish for me to meet.
The book is Paving the Way for Madam President by our guest Nichola Gutgold. For all of us here at Penn State Public Broadcasting, I'm Patty Satalia. Have a good night.